Alright guys, so in this video today we're doing something a little bit different. We're taking a look at this £2 piece of metal. And I know what you're thinking.
Boring!
But basically I picked up these M.2 heatsinks for just over £2 from AliExpress. And I'm curious, are they actually going to improve our SSD's temps? Well, that's what we're going to find out in this video. Alright guys, so let's kick things off. So first of all, do not swear at me for leaving this like this, okay? It's not a permanent thing, but we are testing out this motherboard and CPU combo at the moment, and my Wi-Fi is really bad, so we've got a network switch and a router and I've got nowhere to put it right now. But anyway, that's not the point of this video. So this is the system we're going to be testing, and inside there is a WD Green Gen 4 SSD. Now for the most part, the cheaper motherboards that you'll buy for budget builds, they won't have a built-in heatsink. So if you don't know what a heatsink is, it's this just piece of metal. I would assume that this motherboard did have one in the top slot because it is X570 board, but at the moment I'm running it without any heatsink whatsoever. And I've already done a little test, and I can tell you now this gets really hot, like possibly hot to the point that if you run it for too long like this, it could damage the SSD. And here's the thing, with my old B550 board, just for convenience, I used to pop the SSD in and not actually put a heatsink on top of it. I didn't even used to screw it down. So we're going to find out in this video if that was actually a really bad idea, and if a £2 heatsink can actually improve and prolong the life of our SSD. Right, so we're on Windows and we're just going to have a look in hardware info and have a look at the SSD. And we're going to put it through a little test on Crystal Disk Mark and see how hot it actually gets. I will zoom in, but you can see our WD Green SN3000 1TB SSD. Now there seems to be like 3 sensors for the SSD: temperature, temperature 2 and temperature 3. It does tell you what these are for if you highlight over or if you hover over them. So that's the current temperature of the NAND flash media. Drive temperature 2 is for the ASIC controller, so I guess just the NVMe controller. And then it says for the temperature 3, current temperature of the NAND flash media. It looks like that's kind of the same as that top one. So as we can see, we're getting about 46C, 45C. And obviously that is an open test bench kind of thing, so I don't know how having it in a case with a bunch of fans would affect the temps. The GPU fans are spinning, so I don't know if that would provide any sort of cooling towards the SSD either. But let's go ahead and actually take a look at Crystal Disk Mark and see how hot the SSD gets without any heatsink on it. Okay, so straight away we can actually see, and like I said I will zoom in, drive temperature is 63, drive temperature 2 is 87, 89. I'm pretty sure that's pretty bad. I don't know how that correlates with like the drive's health. Is that going to destroy the drive over, you know, the span of months or years running an SSD or M.2 without the heatsink on? Drive temperature 3 is about 60, so these two are on the high end. I'm not actually sure what the safe operating temperatures are. Look, that's 95C, it's going red on the drive temperature. On the drive temperature 2, it's gone red. 96C it hit on the ASIC controller. I apologise if I'm saying this wrong. But that's pretty bad, isn't it? I'm pretty sure that's not safe for longevity or long periods of use. And I actually really am interested to see how much of a difference the little cheap M.2 heatsink will make, and you know, for £2, is it worth it if your motherboard doesn't have a built-in heatsink? So it looks like the temperatures have like dropped down a little bit. So yeah, that is how the drive is currently running without a heatsink on it. Right, so the PC is all powered off. We're going to just remove the graphics card so you guys can see us installing the M.2 heatsink. So it's from a brand called Tekka, and I have actually used some of their fans before, maybe RGB controllers. Obviously this is like from China. Well, I'd assume it's like a just cheap thing. Tekka M.2 7BK. Not sure what that means. But inside the package, we get the heatsink. So it's got 2 compartments on it. So the SSD will go inside of this bit and then this will go over it. And you do have 2 thermal pads. So I'm pretty sure you would only need one on top of the SSD, because the idea then is it can dissipate the heat through to the heatsink and take away some of the heat from the actual SSD. But yeah, so thankfully getting this SSD out is toolless. It's got a little tab. Saying that, I think we actually will have to put a thermal pad on the bottom and then a thermal pad on the top above the SSD, so that it can stick to this, because there's no like screw holes to hold that in place. So we need to make sure it's lined up so that it can still reach the slots. And then the thermal pad on this side. Right. Did move slightly. I mean, I think it's actually stretched it a little bit, but it should be fine. No, there we are. Right, so I figured out what's stopping it from going in. I don't even think my camera's going to focus. This is like a screwless locking tab for it, but like the plastic underneath it is hitting the bottom heatsink. So it's not ideal that we've got to put this drive in like slightly angled. It's not actually flush. It's not flat, should I say. Right. So we have got it in like this, but it is angled, and that's because this locking tab isn't gonna work. But the thing is, if your motherboard has this locking tab, it 99% will have, like I'm 99% sure it will have an M.2 cover on there anyway, so you won't need something like this. But yeah, for normal ones that have a screw, this will be fine. But if it's got a locking tab, there's a chance this plastic's going to hit that bottom heatsink. Alright, let's pop the graphics card back in and see if it's made any difference. Right, so we're back in Windows, and let's just take a quick look at the drive before we run a test. I believe it was around 46 before. I'll try and put like side-by-side comparisons. Well, it is quite a little bit cooler. So the main thing will be seeing if that drive temperature 2 actually spikes all the way up to, was it 96C? That would be the main thing. So let's go ahead and open up Crystal Disk Mark and see what it maxes out at. Well, straight away it hasn't spiked up as fast, has it? I'm hoping you guys can see that fine. But we're at about 62 for the ASIC controller. I don't know how you're meant to pronounce that. It's jumped up 68. We'll give it a minute and see where it kind of maxes out at. But I'm pretty sure our drive temperature for like 1 and 3 were also near 70. Like I said, we'll put some comparisons on the side on the screen, and from the moment we start the test, just to see. So it looks like it did spike up, the drive temperature 2 did spike up at one point to 71 max, but for the most part it's averaging around 60C. And we could do a final test. There is an M.2, a second slot for the M.2 that does have a heatsink and it hasn't been used yet. So maybe we could then do a comparison to the built-in heatsink on this Asus TUF X570 and see how it compares. So yeah, maxing out 70. Let's see if it goes any higher than that. It's creeping up a little bit, but before that was 96. That was crazy high. But yeah, it doesn't seem to spike anywhere above 71, 72. So far, it seems like it's actually done an alright job. Aside from the fact that it wouldn't fit with our kind of quick release, no tools locking tab, and we have got it. It is a little bit slightly angled because of how much lower the standoff is because of the locking tab, but we've got it in with just a screw at the moment, and yeah, it's definitely cooler. As you can see, this is quite a relatively new drive as well. Still got 100% remaining on it. I've had it for a few months, but it hasn't been in my PC for about a month or two. But yeah, I think that's about as high as we're going to go. I think it's it did hit 74. We can see that on the maximum tab here for drive temp 2. But yeah, let's go ahead and do one final test using the built-in heatsink on this motherboard. Right, so we've got the heatsink from the bottom slot, so let's just make sure to take the protective film off. Let's install the SSD. Let's just go ahead and screw it into place. Right, so let's go ahead and turn it on and see how the £2 heatsink compares to the built-in ones from this Asus board. Right, one more time, let's just look at the hardware info temps for it with just booting up Windows, no stress test running. So, ooh, I'm pretty sure we wasn't seeing a drive temp of 31 before, was we? With the Tekka heatsink, £2 heatsink. And it seems that that drive temp 2 is always slightly higher, it's 46. But let's go ahead and run the actual crystal disk mark and see what the temps are like in comparison. So at the moment, drive temperature 2 is spiking up to about 59. It hit 74, didn't it, after about a minute or so, a minute or two. But this heatsink that's built into this motherboard may not be as thick, but we don't know if it's made of slightly better material, but it is longer, it is kind of wider. So it's much wider than the actual SSD, so maybe it's able to dissipate heat out towards the sides better or more efficiently. And I mean, you would expect it from a decent motherboard to have a somewhat decent heatsink on it. I know you can get ones that have built-in fans and all that malarkey, like a fan that actually plugs in through a 4-pin fan header, but it probably isn't necessary. If we can see here, like we can see here, right now it seems like it's definitely a better option to have a board that has a built-in heatsink, but it still did make a difference compared to with no heatsink. But we've hit a maximum of 61 at the moment, which is about 12°C cooler for the drive temp 2. And maybe I'll put together all three of them together with some text over the top so you guys know, because it may not be very clear with my camera. It seems a bit foggy, the camera today. So it seems like that slot on that motherboard is actually still Gen 4, because we are getting the full speeds of about like 5,000 megabytes a second. I believe Gen 3 is limited to 3,500, so it's pretty nice to know that this motherboard does actually have two Gen 4 M.2 slots. It seems like a decent board, and I did pick that up as part of a bundle, which I'm thinking about making a video on in the next week or two. Alright, so let's call it there really. We've done the whole test. We've seen max temp on drive 2 of 64, and with the drive temperature like 1 and 3 about 45. So definitely better than the £2 heatsink, but the £2 heatsink actually improved it quite a lot over no heatsink whatsoever. Alright guys, so that just about wraps it up for this Tekka M.2 £2 heatsink that we picked up. My recommendations are, if you're buying a budget board, usually it's the cheaper older boards, mostly AM5 boards. Even the budget ones do have built-in heatsinks, but there are a few that won't. But the budget AM4, AM5 or older Intel boards that don't have them, for £2 this is definitely worth it. I think we've seen a drop in temps of about 20 degrees. So that could be the difference between your drive lasting a year or multiple years. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.